Can celestial movements, the dance of planets somehow align with seismic shifts in our earthly institutions? Specifically, thinking about the intense battleground of higher education, it sounds like a pretty wild idea, doesn't it? Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're plunging into a really intriguing period, 1981 to 1989. Our source material for today proposes this, well, truly fascinating connection between an astrological alignment, Uranus entering Sagittarius, and the precise intensification of what we now, widely call the culture war in American universities. We'll be focusing specifically on the rise of conservative critique against academia during this unique time. So our mission today is basically to unpack this distinctive perspective. We'll explore the specific timeline of events and trends that our sources link directly to this purported cosmic alignment. We'll look at the core dynamics that emerged and, maybe more importantly, the lasting legacy these years left on higher education. So let's explore this together.
Yeah, and what's really captivating, I think, is how our analysis kicks off by framing this whole historical period through, well, an astrological lens. It introduces these two key components, right? And details their significance within this specific framework.
And it's not just presented as some, loose analogy, is it? The sources seem to assign very specific attributes to each of these planetary elements.
Precisely, yeah. When we look at Sagittarius, it's presented as representing higher learning, philosophy, global perspectives, basically the whole domain of the university. Then you've got Uranus, which in this context symbolizes disruption, rebellion, and pretty significant technological and ideological shocks, big changes.
Okay, so you put those two together.
Yeah.
Our deep dive materials suggest that when Uranus was in Sagittarius from 81 to 89, it wasn't just some random 8-year stretch. Instead, it's supposedly marked a period of fundamental disruption to traditional academic authority and a profound redefinition of the university's very role. It's almost like the source is saying the universe itself was signaling a time for these big shifts in the world of ideas.
Exactly. It suggests these broader cosmic patterns, as the source outlines them, were kind of intrinsically woven into the fabric of events happening on the ground. It sort of guides us to look for connections between things that might seem unrelated at first glance.
That's quite a concept. So, okay, with that cosmic backdrop set, let's bring it down to Earth. Let's walk through the specific events our deep dive material highlights, show exactly how these Uranian disruptions, as the source calls them, supposedly played out in higher education. Where do we even begin on that timeline?
Okay, so we start right at the beginning of that transit, 1981 to 1983. This was the period when the Reagan administration began initiating those pretty significant cuts to higher education funding. That's a practical, immediate disruption right there. At the same time, universities across the country started adopting early personal computers, PCs. That's a technological shift that would have huge implications later. And ideologically, this is where the source says conservative suspicion of academia really deepens significantly, kind of laying the groundwork for future clashes.
Wow, yeah, that's a rapid convergence, isn't it? Funding changes, new tech-hitting campuses, and this growing ideological friction all at once. So as we move into the mid-'80s, say 84 and 85, what was the next major development our sources pinpoint in this academic landscape?
Well, that's apparently when we saw the emergence of what the analysis calls the curriculum wars. These were really intense debates focusing heavily on multiculturalism and direct challenges to the traditional Western canon, basically asking what perspectives should define a university education.
Right. And how did those debates, which started on campus, how did they connect to the broader political scene? Did they just stay in academia?
Oh, far from it. This is apparently where the Republican Party, the GOP, really began leveraging this campus unrest. The material highlights how these academic debates were quite strategically framed as a culture war wedge issue, effectively turning them into broader political ammunition way beyond university walls.
Okay, so these curriculum wars are heating up. What did our deep dive material reveal about the role of maybe other influential organizations during 86 and 87? Were others getting involved?
Yeah, definitely. During this time, conservative think tanks became particularly active, according to the source. They produced a series of influential reports that directly criticized what they termed liberal bias within academia. And critically, these weren't just internal documents for academics. They were amplified by national media outlets, really pushing this narrative of academic bias right into the mainstream public discourse.
I see. And finally, as we approach the end of this astrological transit, 88 to 89, what happens in the political arena as Uranus is getting ready to exit Sagittarius?
So this period saw George H.W. Bush's presidential campaign explicitly incorporating values rhetoric. And it was tied directly to these critiques of universities that had been building up. It became a pretty prominent theme in the campaign. By the time Uranus actually exited Sagittarius, the analysis observed that it left behind an already, quote, polarized campus landscape. These divisions were firmly entrenched, really set for the next phase.
Hmm. So you can really see how these seemingly disparate threads, astrology, policy, technology, ideology, are woven together in this particular narrative from our source. It's kind of like watching two different forces, maybe appearing opposed, but actually emerging from the same disruptive energy. What was the core dynamic at play here, as identified by our source material?
Yeah, what's really insightful here and what our source challenges us to consider is this idea that these seemingly opposing forces, like, say, academic expansion and conservative backlash, weren't totally separate phenomena. Instead, the analysis posits they were both manifestations of the same disruptive energy attributed to this period, specifically in the domain of higher learning.
Okay, so on one side, you had what looked like an internal evolution happening within academia itself.
Exactly. You see the progressive expansion of voices and disciplines within universities, a diversification, of thought and study fields.
And then on the other side, this pretty significant counter movement pushing back.
Indeed. Simultaneously, there was this really robust conservative backlash, and this movement strategically framed universities as ideological echo chambers and actively sought to challenge that internal expansion. The core dynamic, according to the source, is that both were fueled by the same disruptive energy, a kind of breaking apart and reshaping of higher education. It really makes you rethink how cultural movements evolve, doesn't it? That apparent opposition might actually stem from a shared root cause.
It's quite a profound concept to grapple with. So looking back at this turbulent decade then, what enduring impact did it leave on higher education, according to our deep dive material? What lasted?
Well, our deep dive material highlights two major legacies. First, it argues this period really set the stage for the intense political correctness, or PC wars, that would come to define so much of the 1990s. The debates and divisions of the 80s essentially laid the groundwork, the foundation for those future battles.
Okay, that makes sense. And the second legacy seems even broader and certainly still feels relevant today.
Absolutely. The second major legacy identified is that this period cemented higher education as a permanent front in the Republican cultural strategy. It turned it into an ongoing battleground. So this wasn't just a fleeting moment in the 80s. It established a long-term dynamic that you could argue continues to shape discussions around universities right now.
And so our deep dive into this, unique perspective comes to a close. We've explored the fascinating connection our source material makes between a specific astrological period, Uranus and Sagittarius, and a truly foundational decade in the higher education culture wars. Everything from Reagan-era funding cuts to the rise of conservative media critiques and political campaigns, really leveraging campus issues.
Yeah, it's quite remarkable how these seemingly disparate threads, astrology, politics, campus life, weave together into this cohesive narrative in the source material. It offers a unique lens, to view a pivotal moment in American higher education. So, given this historical perspective presented by our source, maybe consider how might these foundational culture war dynamics solidified decades ago continue to shape our contemporary conversations? About knowledge, values, the very purpose of universities today. What parallels might you observe in other institutions currently facing similar kinds of disruptions? Just something to mull over as you move through your day.